I was an addict. You can see it there. You know, I wanted to push things. I had a great discomfort in my own skin. Find someone you trust and love and just tell them you need help, and there's always someone to help you. You don't want to, you know. Anytime someone would ask me, I'd just be like, yeah, I'm fine. Because you get really good at manipulating, you get good at covering up. You don't want to be in the spotlight, and you get really good at lying.
Just before we jump into the podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, over 89% of you guys have not clicked that subscribe button. So if you are enjoying the podcast, make sure to click that subscribe button. Honestly, it means the world to me, and honestly, I appreciate all your support. Let's jump back into the podcast. Alasdair, absolute pleasure to get you on the podcast today. And honestly, kind of hearing about your story, obviously, with addiction, and obviously recently being diagnosed with ADHD. It'd be great to kind of get you on the podcast to break the stigma about that today. How are you getting on anyway?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm absolutely knackered, but good. It's been a busy time of year for me. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, pleasure. And obviously being a chef as well, I imagine the hours are quite long. I can see it.
Well, yeah, it's funny. Well, yeah, I do private catering now. So it's very calm until it's not. And then suddenly it's just bam, 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 bam. And usually this is quite a quiet time of year for me, but it seems to have just kicked off, which is good, but I like to complain.
Amazing. And we were just saying then before we got started as well, obviously, like your kind of relationship with allergies, obviously, being a chef and obviously working in catering, but also you say one of your friends has got allergies as well.
Yeah, well, my cousin is highly allergic to peanuts, and so all our life, I'm very close with him. And even like if we were able to go on holiday, I've seen these moments where it's been horrific, where it feels like he's nearly died in my arms, and it's something I hold really dear. That, and I understand that there's actually really little information about it. People don't get it. And I've actually been very, as a chef, and knowing that, I've been very impressed when you do see it in places. I was actually impressed with, I think I went to like a members club, which I'm not a member of.
Is it Soho House? Because they're brilliant, yeah.
So, well, I was amazed by them, which actually very few people do. But what is amazing, if they ask you, you've got an allergy, and if you say yes to anything, the waiter isn't allowed to take your order. The chef has to come out and take your order. And I think that's genius. That's exactly, because that's where it all happens. It's the miscommunication between the waiter and the chef. And I get it, you know, we've all worked in restaurants, you know, if you've waited and you've got some important information, you can lose that in the rush of the restaurant, and then suddenly it's gone. But they don't understand that someone can die at the end of that. And it's a big fucking deal.
I've always said like that was one of my best experiences. I've only ever been there once. A friend like invited me along, and like you said, like when he gave me that option, he was like, "Do you want to speak to the chef, or do you trust me?" And even just like giving me that option as well. Like I think now the chef actually has to come out, but like giving that option just like really reduces like your anxiety. I imagine, or for anyone obviously living with an allergy. So yeah, it's a shame there's not more places like that kind of thing. Like yeah.
I have a feeling they probably had an incident, because I know like they used to have a very big Asian menu, and there used to be like nuts on the table, and suddenly one day it was all scratched.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, good on them.
No. And we jumped straight into it, but could you just do like a brief introduction to the listeners if they've not come across yourself before, Alasdair?
Yeah, sure. So I am Alasdair. I'm a chef living in West London. I'm an alcoholic, drug addict. A sober one, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, thrilled to be here. And 30. What else do you want to know? I'm a tourist.
Yeah. If we go, I always love it with guests. I think I always kind of go back to them, like kind of like the early years of because when I go back to the early years, you can link back the dots kind of thing, looking back. I mean, what was the early years like for you? Obviously, going through school. I know it's quite interesting. I read that you're very different to your sister.
Very different to my sister, yeah. Who went to Oxford and yeah, was the star pupil and all that. Good on her. But yeah, I think yeah. I mean, it's funny because I look back a lot as well, and it's only recently like you can start to think how helpful that is, because I can get completely obsessed with it. When I start to look back to, I mean, like as an addict, you start to think a lot of the questions of like, why the fuck me? How did this happen? Could this have been different? And actually, it's a bit like watching your house burn and thinking, oh, I wonder what started that. You know, it's actually, it doesn't matter. put
you
it
can get
out.
like obsessed with like the small details when in reality, like,
Yeah,
I mean,
it just put out the fucking fire. But it's I mean, like, it's funny because it's also, it just comes down to identity as well. You know, I feel weirdly enough, I can feel lost as a kid. I felt like I had a problem with identity as a kid, and I felt like I had like a problem with identity now in sobriety. But I kind of, in an odd way, had one while I was using, and that kind of played into it. Yeah, into hugely like the shame more than anything, but also I guess pride with it as well. And it's a weird one, pride, because it sort of feels like shame and pride are opposite, but they go hand in
hand in hand.
hand.
Yeah.
And
I mean, what was that age then for yourself then when you realised it was a problem? Obviously, like alcohol. I mean, I imagine that was you quite young?
it's a tricky one. What do you mean when it was a problem for me?
I mean,
Or do you think
what? I
someone
mean,
would have looked at me and gone, that guy has a problem?
I mean, what age would you say when you started obviously drinking alcohol? What age was that?
I don't really remember my first drink, but I can't imagine it was particularly different to everyone else's. Probably around like 12.
Yeah,
That's about normal,
it's
isn't it,
yeah.
guys? Or English.
Yeah, it's that young, like been drinking that.
Yeah, but I don't remember really what it was, but I know that it felt different, and I remember that feeling as a kid of it being different. You know, I remember being really confused why everyone didn't want to fucking do this. You know, this is something, it had a completely different reaction to me. That was clear, because that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah, I had a guy on recently called Eddie Stein, and he was saying like when he was drinking his friends, like he was literally like going through the cupboards when they was like out playing like in the garden or whatever, and he was literally just like craving for it. I mean, did you know from that young age when you had that first drink, like God, like you felt different to the other kids in terms of like you was
Yes, but it's kind of like, how much do you dwell on that? Because also, I suppose, in a way, you know, addiction is camouflaged by teenage years. It's you can kind of look at it and think, oh look, that's a teenager getting drunk. You're not gonna have the light sort of so stemmed on them and think, oh, we got to sort that out because it's a teenager getting drunk. It's like whatever. But yes, I guess I would have known there was something different with me. Did I care? Probably not for a long time. But it's also, you know, it also stems from this thing of I didn't feel much self-worth as a kid and as in school because I wasn't good at any of it. And so you don't, when you don't achieve at anything or get any feedback of worth, you don't get that feeling. But so when you try drinking drugs, it's like, okay, well, this is that feeling.
Yeah. And you try and you find it in like obviously the worst places. Then, like you say, you kind of you spot that obviously you're really struggling with school. Obviously, I mean now we know you've got ADHD, but that wasn't even diagnosed then in school when you were struggling. That
it's so funny, it's so depressing because I feel like I'm just at that age now where it's back in my day. You know, it's like, oh, back in my day they didn't really see ADHD. But I think, you know, everything's sort of just got put down to dyslexia.
Reading about itself, and obviously your dad is obviously a very famous like food critic and journalist. Well, even like your mum, like very successful as well. Was there any like pressures as well as a kid as well? Like obviously your dad was very much in the limelight. I mean, I'm just trying to think as a kid for me as well. Obviously you kind of very much look up to your parents of what they've achieved or where they get to, and I'm just trying to think like was he like additional pressure as well?
Was there additional I would say probably yes, but my pride doesn't want to say it. I mean, I don't think it, you know, it's really hard to diagnose too much because I just don't think for a long time there was too much going on in my head. I think, you know, my life was really simple. I cared about getting high and drunk for just a long time. And it was very, you know, I say it's a really easy way of putting it is that, you know, my life when I was using was really easy and I wanted to kill myself almost, you know. And like now in sobriety, my life is fucking hard but it's amazing. And it's a weird one that, you know, there was almost, you can get caught up in thinking that you're being liberated by only having, you know, this one cause. But obviously the reality is I was put in chains by it. But yeah, you know, I don't think I didn't feel pressure directly like that. I would have thought there'd be more of an existential just sorrow of this was who I was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what was that moment, you know, when you kind of mentioned there, like you felt a bit lost, obviously, like, and obviously your friends going off to uni and they've got a very kind of clear path of where they're going from A to B, and you're at that stage still very unsure. I mean, that must have been quite difficult, obviously, seeing that. I mean, and then did that make you turn to drugs even more then in some ways?
Yeah, totally, of course. You know, this is essentially, you could put, you know, that I drank on my feelings. I drank and I used because I don't like my uncomfortable feelings, and that was my solution. If I feel anything about that, oh God, this is shit about it doesn't matter. I can go get a bag, you know, and that's the constant circle that you're in every day. So yeah, it's the deal. So essentially, yeah, you could say there's an incredible influx of too much emotion going on in all addicts, and the discomfort is too much. So that's why we all used to accept. And, you know, really the drugs, you know, drugs and alcohol is just tip of the iceberg of what it is to be an addict. You know, it doesn't, you know, drugs and alcohol aren't forcing themselves down my throat and in my nose. It's what is making me do that.
Guys, was there anyone you could like speak to during that time, or was it like too much pride? You kind of mentioned there, like was there any like friends you could turn to, or at that point you didn't even realize it was an issue, as big as an issue as it was? Like,
well, I know I actually wrote in one of the things, one of the first people that gave me my advice to go was my drug dealer. And he said, I think you've got a problem.
Oh wow. And he's the first one, like.
Don't fuck off. Yeah. Keep giving me pills in one hand and advice in the other. But yeah, you know, I think of course there are people to turn to, and this is like the big thing I try and tell, you know, everyone who's still in the eye of the storm is find someone you trust and love and just tell them you need help, and there's always someone to help you. But you don't want to, you know. Anytime someone would ask me, I'd just be like, yeah, I'm fine. Because you get really good at manipulating, you get good at covering up, you don't want to be in the spotlight, and you get really good at lying. And, you know, it took me that long. It took me so long to realize that saying I'm not okay was an option. I really didn't think it was. And, you know, there's also a huge part of that of being British, I think. Being a British addict, a whole new layer of,
you don't want to make a fuss.
I don't want to be a problem. Yeah.
It's so weird that it's such a British mentality.
I choose as well with your I was asking about allergies. You don't want to be a bother at a restaurant.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm like one of them people. Like the whole reason I created Make and Say was to get people to like make a fuss about their allergy, because like so many young like kids or teenagers just like don't mention they got an allergy, then go into anaphylaxis or have allergic reaction because they've not started that like conversation. So
it's mad to not be awkward. Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
For you, what how old was you? What age was it when you was like, this is a problem now, and you was like, maybe I need to start kind of like seeking the help? Or
it's again, it's this thing of, you know, what was a problem in my head. It's for me, I suppose, you know, it was, looking at it now, it was a problem before I started drinking. But you know, while you're in it, you know, it was the longest relationship I ever had, and it had a honeymoon period drinking drugs, for sure. It was the most fucking fun I've ever had at the beginning. And, you know, even a lot of people now, I think, a lot of friends I have who aren't, I wouldn't even say addicts, people still carry on doing drugs later on, thinking it's going to be like when they first took it. I think, you know, getting really fucked up to a certain point, it leaves. It's never going to be as fun as it once was. And you're chasing this thing, knowing because it once was amazing, but they're gone. You know, I've completed it. I was running around GTA with no more fucking missions to do, just
So it's
shooting
like,
kids in the face.
so it's like constantly chasing this never-ending high, and you'll never get that kind of same kind of first buzz what you did when you was younger, essentially.
Dude, totally. And it's unquenchable. It's also like, it's amazing seeing people now, sobriety. When you look, for like a few times I've been in, seen a room of people on like coked up, they do not look like they're having a good time.
Yeah.
No one is having a laugh.
And it's so fascinating. Like I've obviously been around it, obviously at uni and stuff, and even in London now, it's such a massive thing. I mean, I'll be honest as well. I've never done drugs. Like I've never done like cocaine or anything. And the reason being, and I've always been really like honest with like, it sounds ridiculous, but I said to my nan like, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, I'll never do that kind of stuff. But I think I'm quite an anxious person. So I think like for me, I just don't think I would have a good time even if I did take it, because I think I'll be so anxious about taking it. I might it'll make my night even worse. But like I do find it mad, like the amount of people like what take drugs, like not all the time, but like and I think it's just obviously like alcohol isn't enough. So it's obviously like you say, how do you get that other buzz, or how do you get that feeling? I don't know. This is my kind of experience with it.
Yeah, you're right. In London, there are certain groups where it's very casualized, and you can see it when sort of if you come across someone who's from another country, they're like almost gobsmacked at the thought of doing cocaine on a weekday.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. If we was like somewhere else where there's other stuff to do, or say, for example, you lived in Australia and you've got the beach, or you've got, it's just like, it's like the environment as well. And I wanted to touch upon that as well. Obviously, you've kind of spoke about, is it genetics, or is it environment, or is it a bit of both? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think, there are many reasons I can make one. It's, for me particularly, it's obvious for me that I was born one, because like I said, it kind of felt like until I've only found my life through recovery. And I say that because that doesn't mean, that I was kind of in that battle even before I was drinking. Yeah, as a kid, I was an addict. You can see it there. I wanted to push things. I had a great discomfort in my own skin, and I was really excited to try drugs and alcohol. I went searching for it. And, I didn't grow up in a house where it was there. I really wanted to find it because there was something that could make me feel different. That's, and there was nothing to point at that age to say, oh, well, this makes sense because this was this. But the only thing you can see is my father was a raging alcoholic, but sober. But yeah. It's anything that can make it. I think, trauma. I mean, there's plenty of trauma that can trigger you onto that thing. And, also, fucking like, if you look at also America, particularly, like the Oxycontin epidemic, you can't help but see there's a nurture aspect there. People who didn't know they were hooked on these things are now physically hurt. People who have a shit life turn to this. So there's a lot of different angles in it. But I think there is the raw beast that is in a lot of addicts, where this is just who you are, and it comes down to a different mindset chemically.
I was going to say,
when I
it's
drink,
like
something different happens to me.
It's like shifting that identity as well. You know what I mean? If like I am an addict, it's like, how do you shift that identity? Like before, when you kind of mentioned about identity and not being comfortable in your own skin. Then obviously when you kind of turn to drugs, then it's just like, oh, like, this is what I do. You know what I mean?
This is who I am. Yeah. I mean, you start to own it. This is who I am. Yeah, it completely took over my life in that sense. I didn't want to leave my house. I was so like, and to be like that drunk where you're kind of self-aware, it's just through the mud, because you're like, I knew I was that guy. I knew I was that guy. If I went out, you couldn't understand a word I was saying, or, I would be falling all over the place. And it's almost like there's something cognitive inside me that can think all these things, where it's just like, because it's that regular.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned there briefly about obviously your dad obviously dealing with alcohol addiction. That wasn't something you ever kind of witnessed when in your kind of early years when you was growing up. That was something.
Yes. No, well, I mean, he was sober all my life. I mean, there's a thing where I never saw him drunk, but he never saw me sober, unfortunately. Yes. But yeah, even though it feels like a sad sentence in itself, there's also an amazing sort of magic to it that I'm part of this thing that he was a part of. After even now that he's gone, and it's just so weird.
Is a part of you which wish you could I can talk to him about what you're going through now, obviously because he obviously went through very similar.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course. And there's this amazing thing that I have that he was a writer, and I get to read him, and that was a huge thing of keeping me sober. So yeah, he did. I got his message eventually. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, that was obviously a bit later on, because I know you've spoken about in your early years of growing up, you didn't read any of your father's stuff.
Oh, I didn't read anything full stop.
Yeah.
I think you could probably, you could count the amount of books I've read with your hands.
Yeah. And you had this like very kind of like godlike thing where when you was in rehab, like someone gave you a book of his, which he wrote about obviously his experience with addiction. I mean, how was it reading that? I mean, that bring back a lot of memories. Was it quite hard reading it, knowing everything?
Well, it was, yeah. I mean, it's just like there's just nothing to compare it to. It was the most, surreal thing ever, and that was the beginning of my recovery, because it was being able to see this. I never really thought we were similar in many ways, me and Dad, and yet it was like I had written that everything he had been through, it was what I was going through, and to see that he was in exactly this position I was in, and he found this new life, and so that was a big thing to show me, okay, I can too. And he also did that in amazing ways, finding all these amazing things after he's died. And not only that, but also like in writing. I've been more into journalism now in the last year, and I would have never done that ever without knowing that he was even more dyslexic than I was, and failed all those like English exams and all that. And yeah, it was that lesson of, well, you don't need to be able to spell to write or to have a voice.
Yeah. I know, it's been amazing. I've been reading your stuff. I actually got a subscription to the Times to read some of the articles you've been reading, and yeah, which is kind of.
Thank you. I should get a fucking.
Yeah, I was going to say, where's your code? Like, you should have like a little code you can like dish out. But also as well, obviously, like your experience of, you spoke about like in private catering, and I mean some of the crazy stuff people would ask for.
Yeah.
But yeah,
parrots.
And I was going to say, how was that experience, obviously, in rehab? Was it quite a scary experience? Obviously, you kind of spoke about on that train journey, it was very similar to your dad on the way to rehab. I mean, what was that experience when you got there?
Like? It is a bit scary. I mean, it's more just horrific. The first week is horrific because you're in detox. So it's coming off all the fucking horrific stuff you're on. And that's not fun at all. That's enough to never want to go back again. But then, I guess there's an amazingness to it. It's because as someone who didn't want to be drinking or doing drugs anymore, I was in a place where I didn't have that option. At the end of the day, I've got a disease that makes me drink, but I still choose to do it. But it's in me that it's hard to make that right choice. So the choice was literally taken away from me, and it felt, looking back, like a shelter from a storm that saved my life just at the right time. Like I was really on the brink of losing everything. So to get that shelter, I mean, like, it's so hard, because people ask me, especially to newcomers, to say like, what's it like? That there are no words that feel right saying, I can't say it was good or great or shit. None of it really makes sense. It was the beginning of the rest of my life though. And I look back on it in awe.
Did you have to hit the rock bottom to kind of, I'm just trying to think, did you have to reach that really low point to be like, for that life-changing moment then to happen, obviously going to rehab and getting this?
Yeah, I think you do. But you know, I think a rock bottom, I think everyone looks when you hear a rock bottom, everyone wants like a specific event, you know, like a title, I don't know, like you shut yourself at your mum's dinner party and that was the rock bottom. But actually, you know, it's much more a place. It's a space and time, you know. There's a book of rock bottoms I could write. And maybe I will.
Yeah.
But it's much more a place where you're just done. You know, you are done with life.
Do you think you'll ever write a book about your experiences later on in life, about what you've been through, very similar to your dad?
Maybe. Never say never. But not at the moment.
I mean, how long have you been sober now?
I am coming up 3.5 years.
Yeah. Is it still, I always think like, I think I asked Eddie on this as well, but is it really hard? Is it always at the thought in the back of the head there at times, like, oh, is it?
No, it gets smooth sailing. This is what I've always, you know, and it's so hard trying to get that through to people who are, you know, dabbling with it. I think it does get smooth. So the fact of, I try and hold, you get to a point where you can hold your life in one hand and your recovery in the other, and they don't touch. That's the point I want to try and get, you know, that I am at. But, you know, it's also, I try and keep a humbleness in it, because really what I've learned as well is I'm in danger if I start believing I'm not a newcomer anymore. If you start thinking, oh, I've got this, you know, this is a disease really that works on ego and pride. So the thought of thinking, oh, I'm in charge now, is a very slippery slope to go back to everything else. You know, I can start thinking, even like, you know, I've had times in early recovery where you think, oh, well, maybe I could do, you know, magic mushrooms and, you know, that would be fine. And it's this thing of maybe you would be, but you're taking this step in your ego of thinking, give me that, I'm in charge now.
Yeah,
you know,
it's quite
I
scary,
can do this.
Kind of like, yeah, territory.
It's all about humbling yourself, yeah, and realizing that I have no control over this thing.
Yeah. I mean, how's it been with your friends? Have they obviously been like supportive throughout this whole thing? And I mean, have you lost friends as well? Like,
yeah, I was going to say, the one still above ground. Yeah. Yeah, you know, yeah, I've got some friends who are still here, some who aren't, but I only surround myself, with supportive people. But it's funny because, you know, when you're using, you don't have a clue what that is. The places and the people you spend your time with is just, and you know, you only in loving yourself and sobriety of a life worth living, you start to value your time. I used to go to dinner parties and it would go on for 3 days, you know.
I think that's something I've experienced like more so recently. I think as I've got older, is like definitely valuing your time and the time you spend with the people. And if they're not making the same effort back, it's like, why should I put the kind of the same energy into this like friendship? Completely. And that's something I've been really kind of like cut people off. Like, I don't know, it's more so this year. It's mad really. Like, you kind of, as you get older, I mean, I've just moved back to Manchester as well, but you find it like if there's people not putting in the same time and effort, why should I?
Why should you?
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely, like,
yeah. You got to surround yourself with your same level of hunger. I think I don't care. You know, that's everything. Because at the end of the day, like, life is only about all that. It's all about the people.
Yeah. Surround yourself with. I mean, I love to touch upon obviously becoming a chef. How did that kind of come about? Obviously, early on, you kind of mentioned there you felt a bit lost. How did cooking come about for yourself?
Well, I guess, I come from a foodie family. Dad was a food critic. My uncle was a chef. But really, it was the only place I could work. You know, the kitchens took me in. I was completely unqualified. When I was 18, no one would hire me. Well, I mean, like, why would they? But the kitchens will take you in, and there's a sort of magic in that. That's where you get quite close families in kitchen, and it's the same. You get a lot of foreigners as well coming, and you find your home in the kitchen, and it can be a complete nomad crew, and so that it was kind of by default. And then the love for food came later, which is what's amazing. And yeah, I really do love it. I do love what I do now, and it means so much to me. And I'm someone who definitely wouldn't be able to sit at a desk. I need to be creating things with my hands. And yeah, I feel very fortunate more than anything to have that.
How was that? Obviously, when you was like working in the kitchens, like obviously dealing with addiction alongside that, did that make it worse in some ways? Was it a very stressful environment at times working in the kitchen and the pressures? And
I'd say yes and no. It's also those things where, especially like leaving school, to be honest, that was my first feeling, as we were talking before, of self-worth. I had a job and I was trusted with things. And that was like, wow, that was a big moment. And, we talk about alcoholism and drug addiction like it wasn't one big lineage, from 14 to 27 of being pissed in my room. Of course, there were moments where it got kind of better, like little windows of like pockets of, worth and doing good, and then going really bad, but then maybe getting a bit of breath again. But, these moments of getting worth it's really everything. I've realized that actually, loneliness, I always used to think loneliness was having no friends and no one around you. But loneliness really is having no worth, no purpose. And that's exactly what alcohol and addiction pushes for you. You wake up with no purpose and no worth. And you can be surrounded by all the people in the world. You are alone.
It's really hard, like how people find that purpose as well. Like some people are quite lucky that they can know from a young age, this is what I want to do. But I know, yeah. But I know people as well. Like they've really struggled to find that kind of self-worth as well. I mean, do you think you was lucky in the sense that you was probably exposed to obviously the kitchen through like your dad and like your uncle? Like?
Yeah, but it felt like really hard work, and it's also like exactly like you say, I was so envious of the people I had. Like my best mates around me were these incredible guitar players. They could just pick up a guitar, and those kind of people where it's just like, this is what I'm going to be. I'm a guitar player. I can play the guitar like this. I'm a guitar player, and it's like I used to be so envious of that because it's just like really. I mean, like figuring out what you want is comparatively so much harder than actually getting that thing. Actually knowing what it is you want to do in any mode of life it's a really fucking hard thing to understand. Getting what you want will always be easier than that. So it's a long fucking journey, that, and it's and yeah, for a long time I found it in substance.
How have you kind of, obviously you've learnt this through experiences, but did you get therapy as well, or was it just self-reflection? I mean,
well, now
yeah, just in general really, like, because obviously you can look back at these moments now and be like, this is how I felt at the time till now. I mean, did you ever get therapy to kind of look back at your past? And
absolutely no, therapy is everything. But I the rooms are my big therapy now. I have a therapist who I go in and out of every now and again, and I had in earlier recovery. And yeah, that was, I find it really hard, and that's how I know I need it. Talking about those things I find really hard.
Is there a stigma attached to that, do you think, with males? Do you find that do you feel like more guys now are kind of being open about getting help or speaking to a therapist? So I've got friends who I'm like, I know that then like it would do them good, but then I don't know. I think like sometimes like, no, I don't need it. I'm fine. You know what I mean?
Telling them they need it, it's an insult.
All right, that's where I'm going wrong then. No, I don't think I ever said that, but I think I might have like worded it in a way. But
yeah. No, I think that is. I mean, like, it's so weird because it's like this thing again where like I know what the rational feelings are. I know that therapy's amazing and all that, and yet there is something inside of me that feels like even embarrassed to cry. I feel really embarrassed to cry. But I know that I shouldn't. I've done all the work in this and, trying to better myself, and I know what the rational, correct thing is, and yet it's still there. I feel embarrassed as a bloke to cry. And, I don't do it that often because, as a kid, I remember I used to cry all the time. And I remember that feeling of feeling so embarrassed about it. I used to cry really easily. I mean, I'd fall down and I'd cry, but I didn't want to cry. And so I think I trained myself to never cry.
I think you're like me, to be honest. Like, I think my girlfriend's seen me cry once in the 4 years we've been together, and she calls like, "You've got black heart, like you never cry. Like we could watch something sad." And yeah, maybe I need to speak to a vet because I honestly like, I'm trying to find a therapist at the minute. Actually, it's actually really really fucking hard at the minute trying to find. They're all like full capacity, and I've already reached out.
Really?
I reached out to
That's really interesting.
Reached out to 5 or 6.
What's going on?
Yeah, it's mad. Like you just can't seem to get one. But yeah, like
you do online.
What's that?
You can do online, can't you?
Yeah, that's what I mean, and that's why I've been trying to do it as well. Like, yeah,
wow.
Booper. But yeah, it's interesting about obviously guys not crying. Yeah, I think I don't know what mine is. Like maybe I don't know.
It's
I
bizarre,
find it hard to tap
there's
in.
Something like, there as well, especially as you see, like the biggest killer of suicide of young men. And then I remember actually my therapist telling me, which is also even more interesting. I knew that the biggest killer of young men was suicide, but then if you take all the suicides in England, and the 3 things they have in common, most in common, is white, male, and over 50. And it's obviously not the biggest killer when you're over 50 because other things are killing you, but it's still the most common demographic. It's white, male, over 50. And it's because I think, as a bloke, you get to that age and you're like, have I been a success or not?
I think there's more.
Probably be sad.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's even more pressure now. Obviously, like, like growing up, probably same for you, wasn't really like social media, and like now there's like a constant like seeing what other people are doing or where they are in their life, and it's very hard not sometimes to like compare and be like, well, this person's been more successful or they've got nicer, you know what I mean, or they've got nicer holidays. It can be really hard. I think more so now for like the younger demographic growing up is like this constant comparison with your next door neighbor or like the person across the road. So yeah,
or what's online.
Yeah,
it's just mad. Yeah. It's. But again, it's that age of back in my day.
Yeah, I know we're getting to that age now, kind of thing.